If you have ever wondered what it's like to present an HR strategy to the one and only Warren Buffett, you might want to keep listening because my guest Maria has done just that.
And at the time, we were 43,000 people. And the very first thing I did was figure out what are the metrics that are most important. I didn't want to lose my street cred as a P&L leader. We calculated the cost of each stage of the employee lifecycle and then implemented results that delivered a 10x value and drove down the costs by $95 million a year. HR needs to be able to say, we're driving critical revenue and we're not just an expense and we're not just overhead. We're critical to the organization meeting its revenue targets and exceeding the growth targets. And we need a seat at the table.
All right, welcome back to the Human Capitalist Podcast. I am your host, Trent Cotton, and today we have got someone that is, I've been so excited to have her on. I was in the audience at RPOA in October in Chicago, and my panel, I believe, was after my guest, and I had all these things that I was going to say, and she literally stood on stage and completely took my thunder, but I am totally okay with it because I am such a fan. But if you have ever wondered what it's like to present an HR strategy to the one and only Warren Buffett, you might want to keep listening because my guest Maria has done just that. Maria, welcome to the show. Finally, we got our schedules to converge.
Yes, with our crazy travel, it's nice that we can both be in town and able to do this. So thank you very much.
Stationary on a Friday afternoon. Usually I tell people, if you want me stationary, Friday afternoon is it, but don't expect a lot of brain power on a Friday afternoon though.
I'm sure you have
But
plenty.
good. Yeah. Well, I am not going to do any injustice to your background. I really want you to tell your story because it is so absolutely fascinating. So where did you get started and how in the world did you end up in HR?
So I went to college at St. John's in New York, and in my senior year, I started my job at Geico taking accident reports over the phone. And when I graduated, they offered me a job as a recruiter. And that was my entry in. And then I was in benefits, and then I was the HR manager for the Northeast, New England, New York, New Jersey region. And I went back and got my MBA, and I have a dual degree in management and finance. And when I graduated, the regional vice president said, what do you want to do next? And I said, I want to run HR. And he said, that's not going to happen. You can't advise the business if you don't know the business.
How
So
smart.
yeah, that is the best advice that I have gotten through my career. So I found myself managing homeowner sales and service, and ran a big team. And about a year and a half in, the CEO said, we're making a big pivot and you've got background in HR. So let's see if you could put your people skills to work and manage us out of this position without losing a person and without losing a customer. So we very successfully navigated that challenge. And I found myself drawing on those HR skills, but learning so much more about how to drive business results. Then I was asked to move to San Diego to open a brand new region as the HR director. And that was building it from scratch, from, picking out the artwork on the wall to hiring 2,500 people and supporting the leadership development. And after I got that up and running, the company was growing so quickly that they said, you know what? We want you to come and run customer service. And that was my first partnership with IT because we were just starting on the internet. So we stood up internet customer service, and then I moved to sales, and I ran sales for 10 years and took that team from worst in the company to first in the company, and loved sales and thought, this is where I'm going to spend my time. Well, we outgrew the California office, and I was asked to come to Arizona as we were opening a new region and run operations there. And that was expansive. We had 7 states, a $2.5 billion P&L, 1.5 million customers, and we were in the little city of Tucson, which is not known as a hotbed for talent. But I was part of a great team and leading a great team, and we started exporting talent to Dallas and New York and California. And we were the fastest growing, we had the most profit, we had the most growth, but we also had all of the best talent metrics. So I was asked to leave my operations role and go run talent for the whole organization. And at the time, we were 43,000 people. And the very first thing I did was figure out what are the metrics that are most important. I didn't want to lose my street cred as a P&L leader. So how do I translate all of these, soft and fluffy metrics into something that really drives financial results? And I spent a lot of time thinking with my team, how do we impact the 2 biggest metrics? And that's something that I love to do with clients, is make sure that you're driving the big results. Because if you're not, then you're taking yourself and your organization and your team away from those. So you're either taking a step forward or a step away. So we calculated the cost of each stage of the employee life cycle, and then implemented results that delivered a 10x value and drove down the costs by $95 million a year.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So
I'd
it
love to
was
live
pretty
off just the interest of that savings. I don't need to have the 95 million. I just want to live off the interest. That is jaw dropping.
Yeah, it was pretty significant by reducing the cost of hire, the cost of training, and the cost of turnover. So after 4 years in that role and commuting back and forth to DC, I decided to retire. And after a month of laying by the pool, realized I have more to do, and I started getting phone calls from people asking for advice. And that's really how we launched Scarangella Consulting. And we work with such a variety of customers. I think the most important skill that anyone can have is being a lifetime learner. So I really strive to work with clients that are not in insurance. I do work with some in insurance, but I want to learn more about different industries and different operations and small companies and big companies. And we work with Eli Lilly. We also work with Dooney and Burke. We work with a nonprofit. We've worked with a great recycling company in Chicago, LRS. So there's a lot of variety.
Sounds
But
like it.
I found out that not all HR leaders do that, and that they don't know the financial metrics or the cost of each stage. And that's where you and I really hit it off, because we think the same way. We're really running businesses, and people are a big part of it.
Mm. It's funny. I think we talked about this whenever we were in Las Vegas, but there was a CHR that I worked for at one point, and I was trying to urge them, like, you really need to understand the business. You need to be able to speak to the P&L, know what the line items are, know what levers to be able to push. And they had me kind of writing Copilot, because I could listen to the finance stuff and then translate it in a way that she could understand. And I remember one time she said the EBITDAD. I said, Come again? The Ebadad, you know that Ebadad? I said, I don't know who you're talking about. If it's it sounded like a biblical character. I said, are you talking about Ebadad? She goes, yeah. I said, okay, well, let's use the right term. But I mean, I loved it because she was trying to use the terminology, and and that was something that really drew me to you during the event in Chicago, is because I was like, wow, there is someone else out there that looks at HR as an actual business unit versus we're just moving people around doing the fluffy stuff.
Yeah. And, it's so interesting because as I started to talk to more and more CHROs and HR leaders, I think there's a strong desire
Oh,
to be
totally.
able to do this.
Hmm.
And there are very strategic HR leaders that are, able to really engage in the business. But I would say the
Hmm.
majority needs some help in that area. And
No,
yeah,
no, I agree with you, and I think your just see if I can follow the flow chart right. So you started out in recruiting, went into the line, and then went back into HR, and then went back into operations. Oh, no, customer service, then operations, and then back into HR, right?
right.
Did I get that right?
You're right. And I spent, of my 37 years, 17 of them were in operations,
Wow.
which is a pretty significant,
Yeah.
portion of my time. So,
And the amount, I mean, uh, unless you've worked either in or congruent to the insurance world, you don't realize how quickly things change.
right.
And the time period that you were in there, it was a lot of conversion of like major technology, people changing. So yeah, to stay there for 17 years, I'm quite sure you could have a university lesson just on the lessons that you learned in that 17 years, I can imagine.
Yeah. And it's such a data driven industry
Very,
that
very.
you need to be able to speak in terms that resonate with the rest of the business.
Hmm.
And,
Absolutely.
I find that many of the CHROs that I talk to struggle to get their budgets approved. And I think because they're not speaking the same language.
Yeah.
So the way that I look at it is if you know the cost of each stage of the employee life cycle, then you can prioritize based on where you're going to have the greatest impact and say, this is the investment that we should make, and this is the return that we're expecting it to deliver. And as long as you're delivering, I mean, I would say if you're delivering 5 times, you should have an easy time getting your budget approved.
Yeah.
And it's tough these days because the world's changing,
Hmm.
and regardless of what political side you're on, there's an impact. And Doge is causing CEOs to say, let's look at our budget and how much of this is nice to have and how much of this
Right.
is need to have. So
Hmm.
HR needs to be able to say, we're driving critical revenue and we're not just an expense and we're not just overhead. We're critical to the organization meeting its revenue targets and exceeding the growth targets. And we need a seat at the table.
Hmm. And it's funny because usually whenever companies cut, HR is one of the first places that they look, and then they're
Right.
surprised by. Um, Now, let me say with a caveat, there have been several organizations that I have consulted, and I go, you need to trim this. You've got four people touching the same piece of paper. There's efficiencies to be gained. Minus that, though, a lot of times they cut HR to the bone and expect you know the people results to remain the same and or better, and it doesn't always work that way. I know you talk to a lot of CHROs, and I know you and I both also have a passion for AI and the implications, both positive and negative, in the workforce. What changes do you see over the next 1 to 2 years in the human capital space?
Oh, I think the changes are going to be tremendous in the human capital space. And, I'm not sure that people are ready for the amount of change that's coming. And, I was at a conference. I work with a lot of PE-backed firms, and I was just at one of the PE firms' HR summits. And there was one CHRO who said we needed to standardize our job descriptions. And in the past, it would take hours and hours. And she said, I said, let's just see if we could do it through AI. And they formatted all of their job descriptions in a matter of a day and then translated it into 50 different languages.
Wow.
And you just think about how long a process like that would have taken in the past. I think the big opportunity is being able to analyze and synthesize data and then draw meaningful conclusions. And, if you think about how many data points there are in every organization, either for talent development or hiring or, whatever the topic is, succession planning, you can develop a strategy pretty quickly by taking your data and using an AI tool to identify trends and strengths, and then take the strategy of, how do you upskill the people that are your high potentials or the people that are not performing as well? Where is the need? And instead of days of analysis, it can be done many times in minutes. So I think the traditional HR is is not going to exist in a couple of years.
Agreed.
I think where HR can add value is really being a strategic business partner that helps to identify how does the business deliver what it needs through a combination of people and technology.
I love that. And I think though, back to your earlier point, I think most people in HR, they have the aspiration to be that business consultant who deals in the commodity of people. But HR is a very process heavy, as it stands now, very process heavy organization. And I think that's where I'm excited, because that AI can give you that immediate lift where you can focus on the human aspect of it. There was a story that you told in Chicago. So and I kind of want to take a little step back. So you came up with this formula, you came up with this plan, and then you had to make a commitment to the board. To the board of Geico, can you kind of tell that story of like, this is how I'm going to turn this around, and what Warren said to you at the end of it? Because I think, like, to me, I was like, okay, I was already hook, line, and sinker in your story, and then whenever you said your response, I'm like, oh yeah, she's totally a badass. So I want you to retell that story. I want to relive it again. It's such a good one.
Oh, thank you. So the very first thing that I did was calculate out the cost of each stage of the employee life cycle and the financial impact. And turnover was costing us $195 million per year.
That is unreal.
And I think, I always joke that, our CEO's head was going to pop off because, it couldn't be real. And, after I went through and explained the calculations, and this is how it happened, I said, I just want half of that savings that I deliver, whatever savings I deliver, I just want half of that to be able to reinvest. The rest goes to profit or to cost reduction or efficiencies. But I just want half of whatever I can save for my budget, and just to be able to, continue on this road. And they said, you're either crazy, stupid, or you've already got it figured out. And, we don't lose anything by letting you try it. And we delivered $95 million in savings. And the way that we did that was looking at all the processes and, what is the cost of this? And what I've discovered is so many people have a desire to do that, but they really don't know how. And I was doing that with my consulting business and walking people through, let me show you how you calculate this. And, you and I've talked about, you learn from everyone you
Oh yeah.
come in contact with. And my oldest daughter said, you need to file a patent because you're teaching this, and it is unique. So we filed a patent and realized that doing this one-on-one and teaching the concepts in speeches or in networking, I can't really make a movement happen the way I can if I use technology. So my middle daughter said, let's build a tech solution. And she has now taken on the role of being the project manager for this. And we are about to bring it to market. And it allows HR leaders to do this. And if you
Mm.
think about, many HR leaders don't have a team where they can build out people analytics. Big companies
Right.
can, but you think about, most HR teams are pretty lean. So to have a tool that guides them through the process and then gives them a dashboard that shows their cost per hire, their cost of onboarding, their cost of training, their cost of turnover, the lost productivity cost. They can go into a board meeting and speak pretty intelligently that turnover is costing us this. This is
Mhm.
what I want to pilot. This is how I'm going to track the metrics. And it would be silly for you not to invest in this. And then they create their own flywheel where they just keep building and they become agile and they adapt to the business. And I'm just excited that I think we can give this tool and have people work with it and just really change HR as quickly as the rest of the world is changing.
So theoretically, with your product, I would be able to go in and it would. I'm sure that there would be some inputs that I would have to give
Yes.
about the organization, and from there, I can go and start asking it questions like, "What's the cost of turnover?" I love the one that you said. I don't think anyone tracks that lost costs.
Yeah.
It's easier to do in sales, I think, because you can look at average revenue per employee, break it down almost by the day. So every day that they're out, you're losing that much potential revenue. I think it's a little bit harder on the operations and the risk side.
Yes.
Like how do you approach kind of the not non-linear or let's just say the hard ways of being able to say, okay, this position is open or the lack of efficiency in this position is costing us X. Like, how do you even begin to unpack that?
So it depends on the organization, of course.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Um, but understanding, so let's say it's a sales position. Every day
Mm-hmm.
that that position is open, you're losing revenue. So are you looking at the time to hire in relation to the revenue loss? And if that's the case, what do you do on the HR side to reduce that time to hire with a qualified person? So let me tell you a little bit about how our model works. And the model
Okay.
and Trent, we haven't brought this to the public yet because the the first launch is going to be in June. It's still in development, but
Mm-hmm.
it's called Marstella.
Okay. So
And it's
we're
Mar
getting an exclusive here. Am I hearing you
you are
correctly?
getting, yes, you
I
are.
love
You are
it.
getting the exclusive.
Awesome.
Um, and it's a tool to navigate the sea of talent ambiguity.
Okay.
So it's your North Star. But you start by taking all of your data and inputting it into our model and using your own company data. So, you're not using the industry averages, you're using
Mm-hmm.
your financial data, your own data, and generating the cost for each stage of the employee life cycle. Then you use your own data to fuel your decision making.
Okay.
And when you're searching out vendors to help you talk to them about the problem you're trying to solve and how can they help you solve that problem and go into pilots with an anticipated outcome. And it gives HR leaders a way to hold their vendors accountable as well.
Yeah.
And if you think about how many vendors are in the space, it'll upskill the vendors also because they'll be clearer on the results that they're trying to drive. And then you just keep building and iterating. And as you make progress, you can show your savings and be able to use that savings to reinvest back into your business. So I think it's really going to be a game changer.
That's fantastic because I think you're hitting on something that a lot of HR people really just don't know how to position it. Like you were able to go in and say, here is a cost. I know that I can take a dent out of it, and how can I use that to reinvest? I think some HR people are really good about, I'm going to reduce this cost, but they didn't go that extra step of saying, but I love the boldness of
Right.
going, I'm going to get half of that. You negotiated your gross margin on the front end. I love it. Um, but like, how are you seeing that this is helping? Geico definitely, because I think most people listening, they may go, yeah, but Maria kind of knew the ins, the outs. She knew where the bodies were buried. It probably doesn't work outside of that. But I'm hearing that you're saying that you're working with clients across industries. Like, what are some of the things that you're seeing?
I'm seeing that going through the process of understanding the costs, immediately things pop up like, why are we touching this 4 times?
Mm,
We can get rid of that. And I use the acronym of SOAK. So what can we stop doing right now
okay.
that's going to make a difference because it doesn't add value? What should we outsource so that we're not paying a salary for someone to do this permanently? Let's say an industry that does cyclical hiring. Why do you want a whole staff of employee brand people and recruiters and interviewers and a selection team when you can outsource that much more efficiently?
Mhm.
So that's the second step. Then the third step is, what should we automate? So what's our repetitive tasks that we could easily automate and do it much more efficiently? And maybe we reduce staff, or maybe we reallocate that staff to the work that's most important, and that's the K. So that's the keep. So what do you stop?
Okay.
What do you outsource? What do you automate? And what do you keep? Because it adds the greatest value to your organization and moves that needle. And when an HR leader can go in and talk about their work in those terms, they are so much more powerful because they're operating like every other leader in the organization does. And they also have a way to justify their budget because they're
Absolutely.
saying to the CFO, yes, this is our salary budget. This is our impact. We're serving, let's say that they had a staff of 10 HR leaders for every 10,000 people. Well, now with that staff, we can serve 100,000 people. So
Right.
HR doesn't have to grow at the same pace that the rest of the organization does.
Mm.
And looking at how you leverage tools to be more efficient is the way of the world.
Yeah.
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 And I love that because I think a lot of times people, if you're not number driven, like, like me and you, I love numbers. I always tell people, I said, I trust numbers. I don't trust people. It's probably not the best thing to say when you're in the people business. But, I think of everything in an equation, and, it just kind of comes natural because that's the way that my brain works. But not everybody thinks that way. And if you don't think that way, it could prohibit you for like really kind of digging in and figuring out, okay, this is
Yeah.
what I need to do. But having a system that's built by someone who, one, has proven that this works, two, is thought about it. I love the fact that you're building this because you sat on both sides. It's like you created the HR API. I just thought about that. I mean, you're doing the translation between two different programs. I love that. And soak, I'm going to write that one down. I like that. I love that process.
Yeah, I believe in making things as simple as possible so that you could spend time really thinking about how to make it better.
Mm,
And understanding where you are today should not be hard. And
right.
and figuring
No.
out how you're going to deliver greater value, that might be more challenging. But a good understanding of where you are today and what's adding value and what's not needs to be simple, because then you
Right.
could build your strategy. And then what's the framework for how we implement this? And how do we show value? I mean, that really, we're all paid to do jobs, and
Hmm.
it's about the outcome, not about the time spent.
Yes, I one of my pet peeves is whenever someone goes, "Oh, I'm just so busy." And it's a me thing because I was always taught don't be busy, be productive. If you're
Uh-huh.
busy, then I want to know why you're busy because you're not doing something right. And so I always have to stop and go, okay, not everybody was raised the way that I was raised. Um, but your history and your trajectory and your exposure within Geico, is pretty extraordinary. I mean, you got to see several different facets and serve in a leadership capacity in different aspects within the job. Like what are some leadership lessons that you walked away with that really kind of shape your approach to HR?
I would say probably the most important thing is you're never going to be great at everything. So know what you're good at and then find people that you can put on your team and partner with who have skills that are different than yours. So together you can do anything. And one of the things that I'm really proud of is I always built great teams. And it's not because I did everything. It's because I found people that had complementary skills and gave them the room and the opportunity to be their best. And then, really thinking about what do you want to be known for? And how do you work towards what you want to be known for? So, you know, grab attention because you're making big changes and you're having big impact. That's how you get attention and you get opportunity. Um, and I also think, you have to be self-reflective and understand that you're not always great, but as long as you can learn and continue to progress, that you really can do anything. It's just a matter of how long it's going to take you and what lessons you learn along the way. Uh,
Mm.
and then don't take yourself too seriously because life should be fun too.
Yeah, I think to me the teams that I have worked on that I had the best time, we were under such incredible stress and had such high targets. But as I was listening to you talk, all of us we played off of each other. Like singularly, we could have done the job and it would have taken us longer, but together it was almost like a divide and conquer. And I think that's what made it so fun.
Yeah.
Um, and then too, isn't it fun to watch people that you hire who are doing great, how they go about solving a problem? You think you know the way that it should be done, but you give them enough room and they accomplish the goal, but they go about it in such a unique way. Like to me, that's always the fascinating part about leadership.
Yeah, and sometimes they exceed your expectations. And
Absolutely.
they're able to deliver much more than you had even thought about. That's
Yeah,
when it's really pretty magical.
it is. I had one leader who worked for me, and I gave them a task to do, and I really kind of had to watch myself because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't being overbearing or whatever. And they solved it quickly. I mean, to the point where I said, have you looked through this? Are you sure this is the right answer? And then so I kind of did my own little checking, and I remember calling her late at night. Late, it was like 7:30. I shot her a text first. It's like, hey, you're not with your family, or I'm not going to interrupt anything. She goes, no. I said, I've got a ninja in my brain. I need you to put it to sleep. And so she answered the phone. I said, how in the hell? I didn't say hello or anything. I was like, how in the hell did you get this so quickly? I have tried to reverse engineer this and I cannot figure it out. And when she went through it, I'm like, it is, wow, that was simple. Like I would have made it so, it's probably one of my favorite moments because both of us laughed. She says, I told you I wasn't going to solve it the way that you wanted me to. I said, you solved it. That's what I wanted.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to learn how you solved it. So I think that's one of the fun parts of leadership. What's been the most, I guess, the biggest people or most complex people problem that you had to solve, and what did you learn from it?
Uh,
I mean, you already solved one big one with being able to kind of track the cost and the efficiencies and all of that. So give me another one that's not as grand.
Well, it wasn't when I was in a I was in a people leader role, but I wasn't
Hmm.
in HR. Can I use that one?
Okay. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So when I took over the sales team in San Diego, we were selling policies for 10 states and competing against all of the other regions. And we were in last place for metrics. And of course, I love a challenge. And I had a great boss who said, well, if you're really a good leader, you'll take them from worst to first. And that became my mission.
Wow.
And, asking a lot of people, why are we here? And there was this whole thought process that people in San Diego don't work hard. It's a sunshine tax. And I was like, I don't believe that. I don't think anybody comes to work and says, I'm just going to, be mediocre today, especially if you're in sales.
Right.
So we developed a strategy and a structure and just all pulled together. And over the course of 18 months, went from worst to first. And then Warren Buffett came and served the whole team dilly bars because we met a challenge. But it taught me that, you know, first of all, I do love a good challenge.
Right.
And second of all, if you set expectations for people that, they're not going to be first because there is this sunshine tax or whatever the reason is, people are going to live up to those expectations. So they're going to live up to low expectations. They're going to rally around high expectations. And if you figure out how to align people, technology, and process, you can achieve anything that you want to. And,
Absolutely.
everybody else wasn't standing still as we were getting better. So it wasn't just, okay, get from where you are to where the top person is. They continued to get better also. So we had to figure out, what resources do we need? What resources can we tap into that already exist? And how do we just pull together and accomplish this? And it was amazing to see that we were able to do it.
And it's probably in the moment, you know, you, I'm sure there were some days where you're just like, what am I doing? But now I love
Many
watching
days.
yeah, I mean, your whole face countenance changed whenever it's almost like you kind of went back there and, kind of relived the fight, but in a good way, I think so many people just they don't want to take the challenge, but that's where the fun is, man.
Yeah. And sometimes you got to think about what's the big vision and how do you get there? But then you also have to think about, okay, so if this is where I want to be at the end of the year, what do I have to do every day, every week, every month to get there? And how do we make sure that we're making progress? And if there is a backslide a little bit, what caused it and what can we learn from it? And how do we keep the team with really high expectations, but be positive and keep moving them forward? And yeah, there's going to be moments where you're like, oh my gosh, are we ever going to get there?
Right.
But you just got to keep pushing through. And that resilience is what really makes the difference.
Yeah, there's a Roman proverb that says, there is no victory without a fight. And I love like simple little things like that where you just kind of, all right, let me unpack that, So it's whenever I'm having those rough days, it's something I try to remember. If I do this right, there's a victory on the other side. So you've opened up your own consulting. You've
Yes,
got, the product that you just talked about launching. I mean, if I'm listening to this and I'm a CHRO and I'm going, oh my God, I need her as my co-pilot. Like, can you kind of walk through what do you do for companies in case someone might be interested in working with you?
sure. We do executive coaching, and I work with many senior leaders. So COOs, CFOs, CEOs, CHROs. Um, I also help get the C suite aligned.
Okay.
So a lot of the work that we do in private equity, the leadership turns when the company's sold, or they'll bring in new leaders. And the most important thing is to get that team really clear on and aligned on the vision and how they're going to get there. So some of my favorite things to do is our quarterly C-suite retreats. And we have a series that starts with building trust. And then what do you want your brand to be? And how does that translate throughout the organization? And then how the next one after that is about conflict and accountability, and really making sure those conflicts are happening, but in a productive way, and that everyone is holding each other accountable. And then we talk about team effectiveness, and how do you communicate throughout the organization and continue to strive, because many times when the team first gets together, you can find some low-hanging fruit and get some wins. But after you get those first wins, it gets harder and harder.
Yeah.
And how do you keep rallying towards that expectation? And the other work that we do is strategy work with HR. So understand what your costs are and where you can have impact, and how you can build a strategy and a framework so that you're a long time contributor. And
Love
then we
that.
have our product, Marstella.
That just got announced today. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
So, like, if I'm interested in maybe just kind of the product aspect of it, is it ready to go to market?
Yeah, it'll be
Marcella
available.
in June.
Well, it's not ready today, but it will be
Mhm.
ready in June to go to market. And
Awesome.
we're going to have um, quarterly releases to keep adding more enhancements. Um, I never thought I was going to be a tech founder. Never.
It's funny how life just kind of takes you in its own little direction.
Yeah, and I spent a lot of time reading about tech founders and where things can go wrong. And the interesting thing is there's really a need for this product in the market. Um, and CHROs, or even if you're a solo HR team, you can use this.
Mm,
So instead of having, you don't need to build a people analytics team to do this now. You can just take your own data and input it, and have the dashboards and have the details ready to go. So
I love
um,
that.
yeah.
Well, maybe whenever it's all ready to go, I can have you on and you can give us a tour.
Oh, that'd be great. Love
I'd
to
love
do
that.
that. Would love
You know
that.
me in tech. I love to dig in on that kind of stuff. Are you ready for some rapid fire?
Sure.
All right, give me a book that changed your perspective on business and or HR.
The Growth Mindset by Carol Dweck, and
Great one.
it changed my life,
Mm,
and it helped me understand there were times that I was getting stuck in a fixed mindset. I don't think anybody is really in growth or fixed all the time. I think
right.
we vary based on the circumstances, and it's always a good reminder, you know, keep learning. You can power through, learn from others. So that's a book that I still refer to.
Yeah,
It's a game
same.
changer.
Um, yeah, and there's one I'm going to give you that kind of goes along. It's it's a different angle of the growth mindset. It's called Let Them
Oh,
by
I just ordered that
so
today
good.
on Amazon. I just ordered it.
Oh, Maria, it is kicking my ass all over the place. Because I thought that I had made a lot of progress, and as I'm listening to this, I go, "Oh wow, I still do that." Like, it's
Mm.
a great reframing. I love any kind of book that talks about reframing situations, your mindset, and all that. So, awesome, awesome book.
Well, thank you. I'm
Favorite
glad
pod.
you already read it. So,
Oh, well, I haven't.
I'll,
No, no, no. I'm halfway through it. I listened to it in the gym, and I'm quite sure that people look at me because I know I'm making faces, going, "What the?" Oh shit, And then Mel's. I read her other book. What is it? The 5 second rule about counting down to. Uh, the one that I remember, she said that she would always hit snooze and she would always go, I'm going to count to 5 and get up. And
Mm.
your brain doesn't work that way. So she started counting down. So from 5 to 1, and 1, she takes action. And so she applied that throughout her life. It's another great book. So finish that one and
Oh,
then read her other one. It's another good one.
okay, I will.
Well, what about a favorite podcast or series?
So, of course, yours is my favorite
Oh,
podcast.
you're so kind. That's why I'm such a fan of you.
It really is, though. I mean, I think, the guests that you bring on, that everybody has a different perspective on the same topic. And the more
Hmm.
that we can be exposed to different thoughts around the same, this industrial revolution that's happening, the more effective we'll all be.
You're making me
Another
blush.
one. It's true. And you know me, I'm direct and I don't
I know
filter.
you are. I know you are. So that's why it means a lot coming from you.
Oh, thank you. Another one that I like is the future of teamwork. And I was a guest on that, and Dane, the leader of that, is trying to have a positive impact on 1 million teams.
I love
And
that.
he brings in leaders from all different industries, different perspectives, just on what will teamwork look like in the future. And that's
Hmm.
the only constraint. So it's very interesting.
I will definitely have to. You've, yeah. I'm going to add that to my list. And
Okay.
that's been the fun part about this. Like I begrudgingly went into this. People have been asking me to do a podcast for a couple of years. I'm like, I don't have time for that. But as this topic, AI in the workforce and what's happening with HR, I mean, to your earlier point, I even if nobody listens to the podcast episode, I don't care. I have learned so much from people like you and JT O'Donnell and some of the other people that I've had on that just I always walk away going, huh, I never thought about it that way. So
Yeah.
I love that. So where can people find and engage with you?
So I'm on LinkedIn. Um, Maria Scarangella. It's a long name, but it's it's spelled exactly like it sounds, and hopefully you can put my links
I
in
will. I will
your
put all your links in the notes. Absolutely.
we have a website, scarangellaconsulting.com, and also a new website for Marstella, which is marstella.app. But I would
Awesome.
love just to hear people's thoughts on this and
Mhm.
get this conversation to continue, because I really do think, there's so many valuable people in HR, and there's a transformation that's happening. And the better prepared that people can be, the better off we all are. And I'm at that stage in my life where it's the self actualization stage. So
Yeah.
if I could share what I've learned, I would love to do that. I had, when I was getting started, a friend of mine said, you have all this knowledge and all this experience from the years of working. What are you going to do with it? And I said, I don't know. And they just said, just remember that wisdom that's not shared is just wasted.
Mm. Very true. Very true. And some a leader that I worked for before, she retired, and then I told her, I said, "You're never going to retire." She goes, "I am. I'm going to retire." 30 days. She opened up and did something else, whatever. And so I called her and I said, "So what started this?" She goes, "I knew you were going to call me as soon as I updated my LinkedIn." She said, "Wisdom that's withheld eats you from within." And I was
Oh,
like,
I love that.
"Whoa." Yeah, because she said there are so many things, and she doesn't have to work. I mean, she saved, she did great, but she's got to be one that's moving, and she is one of those that's got to invest in people. She loves to train and develop and push people. Whenever I started working for her, she said, "My job, just so you understand, is to make you so uncomfortable you're forced to grow." And
Mm.
she made good on that. It's the only time in my career I've ever gone to a leader and said, "I think you cast me in a role that I'm not ready for." And she goes, "I did. So how are you going to get ready for it?" I was like, I was not. I mean, she would not let me back out of it, and I am so much better for it. So you
I would
remind me
love
a
to
lot
meet
of
her.
her. Oh,
I would
she's
love
a
to meet her.
hoot. You
What I used
definitely
to tell,
remind me a lot of her.
I used to tell my team, get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Oh yeah.
That's the goal.
Yep.
Because if we're comfortable, then we're digressing. So
Hmm. Yep.
we
You're
need to
already
figure
dead.
out how to get used to that.
So what is you've had so many mic drop moments, but like what is your one liner, something that someone watching and can walk away and remember like, oh yeah, Maria said this.
Um, People judge you based on your actions and your words. And we judge ourselves based on our intentions. And I think a lot of people get misunderstood because they're not communicating and their behaviors don't demonstrate their intention. So, one of the most important things is think about your values and act in accordance with your values and make sure that your words and actions really do demonstrate your intentions. And if you do that, the rest will fall into place.
Awesome. Well, I knew you would have a fantastic one. It's always fun hanging out with you. Um, hopefully, so we're going to have to, I'll send you a text. We'll have to make sure that we're attending some of the same conferences so we can actually hang out
Yeah.
longer. I think it was like, what, 10 or 15 minutes we got past each other in the hall. It transformed. So I want to be a little bit
Yeah,
more
Vegas
intentional
was
the
way
next
too
time.
fast. There was so much going on at that
It
conference. It
was,
was,
it was, but it was so good. Like all of the conversations that I had in the halls were just probably more impactful. Not anything against the people that I went to their sessions, but the conversations and stuff in the hall was definitely worth the trip. So Maria, thank you so much for taking time. I know you're busy, and I will definitely have you on, and we can show out Marstella and get everybody really excited about it.
wonderful. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you so much. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Human Capitalist. This channel is all about community, so comment, subscribe, and join the conversation. This is Trent Cotton, your human capitalist, signing off. Remember, invest in yourself, own your potential, and keep building your own human capital. I'll see you next time.